You're listening to the Water Prairie Chronicles, a podcast that supports parents of children with disabilities by sharing the stories of individuals who have grown up with disabilities and the organizations available to help parents along the way. Stay connected with us by clicking the subscribe button and leave us a comment if you want to join in on the conversation.
In today's episode, Traci Wilkerson talks with Tonya about what it's been like to parent two children with visual impairments. She'll be sharing some tips on how she has helped them learn to navigate the world and how they inspired her to become an orientation and mobility specialist.
Welcome to the Water Prairie Chronicles. Everyone, today's guest is Traci Wilkerson. She's a friend of mine, but she's got a lot of interesting parts to her life that I thought you might enjoy hearing about. So welcome, Traci. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourselves before I get into the actual questions?
Okay, so I have two children who are visually impaired. They are in high school now. And of course, when you have two children with IEPs and with a disability that's very visible, there's a lot of struggles, but there's a lot of good stuff. There's more laughs than struggles because they can laugh at themselves. So at home, it's fine. It's no struggles. But, you're dealing with the public, you're dealing with the schools, you're dealing with every activity that they do. But overall, I wouldn't change anything. And I'm actually happy in a way that they're both visually impaired because, they have a unique bond and they have each other to commiserate with when there's not another VI person around to commiserate with.
I hadn't really thought about that. They've always had that as far as what you remember.
Yeah.
Really.
And that's one thing I think about more as they get older is I'm very thankful that they have each other and they both have the same condition where, you see other siblings kind of struggle a lot and they go through those periods where maybe one isn't so nice to the other. And at least I've seen that, in other families.
Right.
It can be a struggle.
Well, for our listeners, if you've been following the podcast, you actually met Traci's oldest child, Olivia. She was on episode 3, and in a few weeks you'll get a chance to meet her son, Evan. So we're bringing the whole family on with it. They were kind enough to divide and conquer for me, so we were able to tell all of their stories. But
right.
But yeah, and Olivia did a great job, I thought, coming on.
She did.
I was really, I had a lot of fun talking with her.
Yeah, every time she speaks somewhere, I'm like, she just needs a little coaching, and she would be a really great public speaker, I think.
She would, I think. I really do. And I'm hoping that as time goes by, that she'll be able to connect with some of these kids that are listening to it. So so we'll see.
Yeah.
There's been a couple little comments, but I haven't seen much. I don't know if she's had much feedback yet. With so we've already given the condition that you do have two children who are visually impaired, and Olivia told us some of her story, but you know more of her story than she does because she kept saying during it, well, my mom and dad know this, but I don't know this.
Right.
And this is the part that I find that I wanted to ask you more about too, was those really early days, because we have people listening who have infants right now who have just gotten a diagnosis and they're not connected anywhere yet. So when did you find out that Olivia had a visual impairment?
I think it probably took us a while because I didn't have any other children and I wasn't really around babies. So I just followed the book, what the book said. That's what I looked for. That's what we worked on. And so I remember at her 2-month checkup, the doctor asking me if she was looking at me. And I was like, I think so. It was kind of that fleeting eye movement glance. Mm-hmm. And one of the grandparents had made a comment, about the nystagmus. I didn't know it was nystagmus. They didn't know, but the circling movement of her eye. And, they were quickly shushed by the other grandparent. And so I was just like, she likes the lights. I don't know, And so then the doctor was like, well, we'll give it more time at 2 months, And so at 4 months, he was like, all right, you got to go somewhere. Something's not right. And I think we probably knew that by then too, at 4 months, that something wasn't right.
Yeah, because I think a lot of times that's what happens is the parent is noticing something. You go in for that 4-week checkup, you go in for the 2-month, and it's such a
Yeah.
quick in and out. They're not necessarily
Right.
looking for
Right.
especially an
Where
eye
when
condition.
Evan was born, I knew, like, okay, about a month, the nystagmus should kick in, and we were at a visit for Olivia, and I was like, can you just look at Evan? Does it look like he has it? They were like, yeah. So I was like, okay. And so at 4 months, he referred us. The first doctor had no clue what was wrong with, her.
What type of doctor did you go to first?
I'm guessing he was like a pediatric ophthalmologist. Maybe he was in Raleigh.
Okay.
But he had no idea. So, I went back to work, talking, and one of my coworkers was like, we had trouble with one of my daughter's eyes. We went to this doctor. So I was like, okay, I'll call him. And he was really good. He was like, it's either this or this, or this or that, Wow. And it was that.
Okay.
So, and he sent us to Duke. And so that was in that time. I don't remember how it happened, but we did get hooked up with our local agency who started serving us to get her a TVI, teacher of the visually impaired, to come out and start working with her. But it wasn't until, because of course Duke is, you wait months to get in there.
Right.
So she was 9 months old before we got to Duke.
Okay.
And got an official diagnosis. But because I remember him saying, keep doing what you're doing, with your local agency to serve her. And because I think at that time it would have been Governor Moorhead.
Okay.
Serves 0 to 3. I don't think it was a county person. Gosh, that's so long.
So they
remember,
knew it
but
was
somebody was coming.
So they knew enough to know that she needed services. They just didn't know the name of what it was yet.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Because they knew, like, she still wasn't, there was no eye contact. And, but she was super active as a kid. I mean, she was into even though she did everything slower, like, she was just always into everything.
She had mentioned that when people would come by, they always wanted to know what they were supposed to do with her because she was always so
right.
so busy.
I remember her first TVI was just like, I don't know what to do. She's super active. She's not afraid, of doing anything. And the
which
kids
is great.
Were complete opposites. Evan was afraid of everything, and Olivia was not. And so, she would climb on the chairs and turn the lights on and off, and she was just everywhere. So, the lady would try and get her to look at the light box, and look at the shapes and all that kind of stuff,
Right.
But she was just everywhere. But so we did have services. We got the diagnosis, and then I remember we did genetic testing to confirm. Mm-hmm. And it was just kind of like we were, we had more therapy. I think we had an OT evaluation. And she was like, she's fine. And then she did have a PT. I don't remember what for, just kept, even though like she was so active, Evan was not, but they both walked at 17 months, so.
Right.
So when it came to Evan, I did things differently because I was like, they're going to do it when they do it. Here's this child who's super active and still didn't walk till she was 17 months, and then you have the public's opinion about, oh, well, my child walked at 10 months. Like,
yeah. Now mine would have if she could have let go and kept her balance.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, I think that was our thing,
she was
too,
pushing everything else around. So we ended up getting a toy lawnmower, which was...
Yeah, we had the toy shopping cart. I think.
It was a safe barrier before running into things.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So so for those that are listening who didn't hear Olivia's yet, the condition that you're talking about is Leber. Is it Leber or Leber's?
I say Leber's.
Leber's,
it's German, and I don't think Germans would have said Leber's, but
true.
I don't know. I say Leber's congenital amaurosis. Okay. So there's 2 Lebers, but ours Leber's is like the infant form of retinitis pigmentosa.
Oh, okay.
So it's just at birth. is your vision loss, where RP is as you get older.
Right. And it's also referred to as LCA. Is that correct?
Yes, LCA.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And so this is... Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, and based on your gene type, your kids can present different characteristics for LCA.
Oh, okay.
Like our gene type seems to be fairly academic, kind of no other problems. I know there's other LCAs that have some other maybe kidney issues, so there's just based on your gene type, it can kind of affect different.
I think a lot of the genetic disorders are like that, where there's different variants of the different mutations of the genes.
Right. So it's important to find out your gene type with LCA.
And this is autorecessive, is that correct?
Yeah. So both my husband and I carry the same bad gene. So every time we have a child, it's a 25% chance that they'll be affected.
Right. Could either of you find any history in your families of it?
My in-laws found an article about a woman who, I think in the 1900s sometime, was like the first blind woman to go to college. And, like, I think it was North Carolina or Virginia. I can't remember. So she didn't really have a diagnosis, of course, but she obviously was academic enough to go to college and blind. Right. So we're guessing, but on my side, we haven't never found anything.
So it could have been carried for generations and just not the right matchup for it to present. Or it could have been the right matchup and that just not the right the right 25% for it to be.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, and interesting. So I would hazard a guess that relative has the same if they were to have done any type of testing back then.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So so with Evan, you said you were looking for it already. So that
so we knew, because I wasn't hesitant. I didn't want to have just one kid. I was like, been there, done that. We know what to do if it comes up again.
True.
And I would have had more, but I just started late. But so once Evan was born, we knew. And of course, it takes about 4 weeks for the nystagmus to kick in. Yeah. So once I kind of identified what looked like nystagmus, and we were at the doctor, and I was just like, look at him. Does he look like? And they were kind of like, yeah, pretty sure.
Now, I'm curious because I've had different discussions about nystagmus, and I know Emily's is congenital as well, but I don't think it always presents the same way. Did either of the kids have the downcast sunset eyes before the eye movement started, or did they have?
What is that? I don't know what that is.
Like for Emily, her eyes were. It's as if she was looking down all the time. You could just see the top crescent of both eyes. And
mine weren't like that.
Because when I had her in for a 4-week checkup, my question to the doctor, being my first, and I didn't mean this bad, but that my child looked deranged, and I just wanted to know what was going on. And his answer was that she was just curious about what was down below her. And 10 minutes later, he was on the phone to Children's Hospital to get her in somewhere.
Oh, that's funny.
So, but like with you, I mean, it takes the parents to see those behaviors. It's not just this moment in time. Right. This is all the time.
Right. Yeah. So I'm sure through the appointment, he was like, wow, she's really curious about something that can't be what it is.
But then a few weeks later, like you're saying, her eyes started moving side to side from there. And that was just like a tight band or something at first, and then it loosened up a little bit.
Interesting.
So I was curious if that's how it usually started.
No, because I always remember like thinking, oh, Olivia really likes the lights, she's just I don't know.
So, well, I know. It's like, how are you supposed to know? And that's what a lot of our listeners are going to be in that same situation. We have no clue as parents coming into this, And
it'd be nice if that little book had, if your child might have a vision loss or a hearing loss or CP or whatever,
Yeah.
Maybe here's some clues to look at.
You're right. All of those books are missing those chapters. So.
Yes, they are.
So and some of the situations show up later as they get older, but in this case,
you can't cover everything, but
No, but
it'd be nice.
So
At least even as an education tool, it forced people to read it, right?
right.
And have some knowledge about other disabilities.
Or just a checklist, even just to read through just some basic things that, because they have the milestones. They have the milestones.
Write a new baby book.
by 4 weeks old, your child should be doing this. All those things. So like your doctor was saying, by what was it? The 8 week. She should be making eye contact by then.
Right. So exactly. There's a reason we want this box checked.
Right.
Here's why.
So if you're listening, there's not a book out there that we know of yet, but use the other one as a resource.
Right.
If you're not hitting them, ask questions.
Yeah.
So you were talking about the resources that you're plugging into when they were babies. So you had the local, you had a TVI coming by the house.
Yes.
And O&M for, OT for one visit.
PT. Yeah, OT, a valve, a PT, I think to help get her walking. I think that was her thing.
Oh, okay.
And I think that was it. So I know when O&M started at some point, but that may have been once we were at the preschool for the blind.
I was like, she would have had to be mobile first for that to be.
I think so.
I don't think there's any infant O&M, is there?
No, I mean, I see parents who are like, start as soon as you can, but it's kind of like, you just kind of want to encourage them to explore and search and, use their hands and be active, but I can't think of what you would do O&M. I mean, you could make like obstacle courses and stuff like that,
but if they're crawling,
movement. Yeah. Like you just want to encourage movement until they're walking, and then you can start O&M.
So with OT, you said Olivia just had the evaluation. Did Evan need OT?
Well, with Evan, I did different because I looked at Olivia and was like, oh my God, we're just therapied her to death. And, and I was like, I'm not going to do that again. I just felt strongly that kids are going to do it when they do it. We're good parents. We're active. We're working with them.
Right.
You should be talking to them and explaining. I wasn't great at that because I'm not a talker. And so I remember being home with Olivia, looking in the mirror going, do you see your reflection? That's Olivia in the mirror. I was just like, this is killing me. That just was not me. And people are like, you should say, I'm washing the dishes and putting the soap in the cup and cleaning the cup. And I'm going to put the cup in the cat. I'm just like, I just can't do that. That's not me.
Now, see,
I did the best I could.
Now, at that point, you didn't know if she had much peripheral vision or not because she was too young to tell you.
Yeah.
With Emily, we knew that she had some vision. We didn't know what she had at that point, but they had me pull her high chair around the kitchen with me so that she would be right close to me.
Right.
And so I talked, but I didn't have to tell her much because she was close enough.
Could still see.
And that was, I had the chance to go to a literacy class for infants. And what they pointed out was they're not reading for years, but they learn literacy by observation. And our kids with visual impairment miss that literacy stage. And so that's why they're saying to talk to them about it, to describe it.
Right.
And we would see things. She would have a tantrum if a wad of paper was on the table and she thought it was banana, things like that. So we knew she was seeing that much. We just didn't know what she was taking in. And that ended up stabilizing. And today she's still at that same range. So, but I do remember pulling her around. And with Christopher, I never talked to the kid. It was... he was like Olivia. He was running everywhere, so he was there before I was.
Yeah, right. I always tell Evan, I don't remember your first 9 months. I'm sorry, because it was all about Olivia because they were 22 months apart, and she was so active, and he just lived on my hip, because he wasn't going to move. He never crawled, He just sat.
He was being easy for you.
And then he walked, and so I was like, sorry, I don't remember anything about your first 9 months.
Well, he's more than made up for it with his physical activity since then. So Yeah, go
So
ahead.
with Evan, I just didn't I was just not going to therapy him to death.
Well,
And so he did have the TVI. Sorry.
Yeah, I would say you were his therapist at that point because you kind of knew what to do.
Yeah, right. Oh, and Olivia had a music therapist. I do remember that. So there was just kind of, it was very fun therapy.
Right.
Just using music to do different whatevers. I don't know. Coordination, like she would play the drums while the music therapist would play the piano. So I think it was more coordination maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But so that was fun. But Evan, I know he had the TVI, but that may have been it because, again, that eats your time with all those therapists. I was still working. I kept gradually cutting my hours, but I was working and they were both in daycare. And so the therapist would go to daycare because I was working full time when Olivia was born.
Wow.
And so they would keep a notebook and leave notes for me so I know what they worked on. And Evan, I tell you, Evan's so scattered because Olivia was so dominant. But I know he was in daycare.
Well, even being in daycare, they had the stimulation of the other kids and
right,
the caregivers
so I
there.
think that was good for them because, and really at that age, they don't require a whole lot more of attention. It's not like I didn't feel like it was burdening anybody at the daycare with them, especially Olivia is so active and she's very vocal. She's going to speak up for herself. Evan may not, he'll just go with the flow, but they were both fine.
Well, I didn't know them back then. I didn't know them back then, but I've known them since they were preschoolers, and they were healthy, active preschoolers. So
yeah, and then they were at the preschool for the blind. I think Olivia. I remember you asking her. I think she started when she was 2.
Okay.
Because I remember our county wasn't going to let her go there because they didn't understand it was free. And I was like, we're moving out of this county as soon as we can, was my first thought. And then, which we did, to get into Wake County, which we knew would have better services in a very rural county. And so she did, I think she started there at 2 because she was there for 2 and 3. She was in one room. And then 4, she moved into the inclusion room where there was typical kids and VI kids. Okay. And then her year before kindergarten, she was in that preschool that she talked about.
Right. Okay. Yeah, because she was, and it's interesting when we hear our kids talk about these things because their memory and understanding isn't always, they weren't part of any of the decision-making process.
Right.
Unless they've gone back and heard the stories, they really, I just find it interesting to hear their interpretation of what's happened. But she was pretty well spoken as far as what it was. And she was pretty open when she wasn't sure.
Yeah, right.
So when your kids were that little, so when they were infants and toddlers until they got to, I would say even through preschool, what was the best advice that you received from anyone? Putting you on the spot here.
Yeah, that is. I'm not good at that kind of stuff. I don't know. I just think, and I think the one thing we really adopted once they were in elementary school was like life experiences was more important than reading about it. Like actually getting their hands, like how are they going to know what, I don't know, a tractor feels like or looks like unless they get their hands on it.
Right.
So, and the preschool, because it was a preschool for the blind, they understood that. So it was all about, you don't represent a ball on a piece of paper as a circle. You have to actually give them a ball so they can feel it and manipulate it and go, okay, this is a ball.
Right.
And even like a dog, you can have a stuffed dog that still doesn't, it's close, but it's not the real thing. So, it's all about life experiences and getting their hands on things. I think that's the most important. And it was interesting. Olivia had a brief boyfriend who was also VI, but because their backgrounds were so different, it just, they didn't have anything to talk about because he was very sheltered.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't know, like, he didn't know what a plane looked like on the inside. And Olivia was like, no, that's not how a plane is on the inside. You know, she had to explain to him, you know, and so that difference for them, they just didn't have any commonality, you know, to have conversation after a while. So I would say life experiences are super important.
And that speaks to that literacy question again.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one of the examples that when I was going to Governor Moorhead to Perkins School when we were in Massachusetts, we were there the whole time Emily was in the infant and toddler program. And one of the stories they told me that probably hit me the hardest was a CEO of a corporation who was blind. So he's the CEO. He has intelligence. There's no question there. He was called into a court of law to testify. And they told him to raise his right hand, you know, when they were swearing him in. So he took his left hand and lifted his right hand. To him, to raise something, you raise a flag, you're using your hands to pick it up, to raise it up. He never understood that,
like literally,
that you could raise your hand. Yeah. Right. And that one example showed me that if I want my children to be literate in this world, I need to help them see things. And and like you were talking about with what you're doing, and you've done a phenomenal job of getting your kids into experiences that they wouldn't have been able to do anything other than to read about and hopefully imagine the right part of it.
Yeah, and I'm sure our elementary school got super annoyed because I would pull them out all the time to go, we're going to go here. You know, there was a tractor show or there was whatever going on. We were like, we're going to go experience this. And the biggest thing, for me, was we went to Williamsburg, and you know how it's kind of like I don't know what you call it, but it's like a living, it's like a living museum. Yeah. Right. And I was just like, this is why we were thinking about bringing them home for middle school. And I was just like, this is why, because we need to have these kind of opportunities to go and really give them the experience to understand things, because just reading and sitting in a chair is just not going to cut it for them.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what we do.
How did you teach them like the bigger things, like mountains and elephants and things like that?
Oh my gosh, I don't know. I mean, I know their granny would take them to the mountains, to that Tweetsy Railroad. I've never been, but she took them.
Yeah.
And so I know they climb like those fire towers and stuff like that. And we're more beach people, so we go to the beach. But
we'll see when we get to our speed round, which when you say then.
That's right. And so I can't think of big animals. I know we've been to zoos several times, but I think I just always try and relate stuff to something they know, like their room or their house, or, you know.
Right. Oh, true. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I've never seen a petting zoo with a giraffe in it.
Like an elephant, right.
It's kind of hard.
No. We did go to that. I think it was Evan's class that went to that lion cat, preserve out there in like Ashboro or something. But I mean, you can get close because they're in the fence and you can get really close. But, I doubt Evan could have seen that. It could have been Olivia, but she may have could seen if there was enough contrast, like a really light lion, with a dark background. But,
right.
Yeah, that's the biggest animal that we've probably seen up close. But,
it's interesting because I think those are the difficult concepts to try to
and you really just have to compare them to something they know. More like a car,
Yeah.
Like they can act it, they've worked on my husband has shown them how to change a headlight and a tail light and the oil. I mean, he's a mechanic. So he's taken them to work, and Olivia's helped him, change stuff. So, doing stuff like that. But, and washing the car, you get a general feel. And a car can really be compared to a lot of things for size.
Yeah,
I think
true.
That's a good reference.
True. Well, and even a bus, because you've walked inside of it,
Yes.
you know how long it is from
Right.
the inside, you can get a feel for the size of it.
Yeah, because you can get time distance, like walking down the aisle and stuff. Yeah.
Right. Right. Interesting. It's something I'd never asked you before. I was curious how you had done that. So is there anything that you know now, had you known back when they were babies, that you would have done differently?
Probably just a therapy thing for Olivia, but it's, really, how would I have known?
I think
You
that's
just
kind of
have
a
to go through it.
first time parent situation.
Right. You're trying to do the best thing and get them caught up, and really, they're probably going to do it when they're going to do it.
You've seen
Was
the
my thing.
commercials where they have the first child and then the second child. The first one, everything's clean and all, and the second one, they're just throwing the child at a stranger. So I think it's true across the board.
Exactly. Yes. And
Maybe not throwing them at a stranger, but
yeah, right. I don't know. Obviously, dealing with the school system, when I sit in parent sessions for things, that's such an unknown for parents is, if you send your kid to a school for the blind. I knew mine they were going to be mainstream. And like, it didn't even occur to me. Like, I've heard parents say, oh, I just thought they go to the school for the blind. I was just like, that just never occurred to me. I don't know why. But and I think schooling is such, and I think maybe parents need to dig into that more earlier, probably, kind of really research. And I did do some, because I was trying to understand why Wake County, like where kids, how they handled VI kids when we weren't in Wake County, like trying to decide to move and stuff. So I was already trying to figure that out. But you don't know the pros and cons of how they handle it either. The way
Right.
Wake County does it isn't the greatest, but you don't know that either. So,
well, and I know
but
at
with
one
social
point,
media, you can find all that out now.
at one point now, Wake County is the county that Traci and I both live in, but and it's had a lot of changes through the years of how they do things. And when we first moved here, they still had like the regional schools where, like,
Yes, but they've dropped that for almost all the other disabilities, but not VI.
so VI is still at the regional schools. Okay.
Is controlled. Yeah.
And see, I don't
At
like
least
that.
the Braille student is very controlled
Okay.
where
Yeah.
they go. Yeah.
The and I know they've changed which schools those are too. Like one may be at for a few years and then it'll be at another school, it seems.
Yeah, I don't think they've changed for a while.
Okay.
I know about 20 years ago the high school changed, but I don't think there's been any changes since then.
So I'd be curious what our listeners are facing in their states. So if you're listening to this, and you can use the comments in the podcast as well as on the YouTube channel, wherever you're getting this from. Let us know what state you're in and how they do the schools there. Are all the kids mainstreamed into their local school? And that'll help anyone that's listening from your state to be able to see how things are done there.
Right.
I know the states that we had lived in, they were all the same as North Carolina. So, but because Emily's vision was low vision, she was mainstreamed into the regular classroom.
Okay.
We had the choice, but the Braille was what the deciding factor was. And it's why we had to fight first to get her to learn Braille, because that was going to force her to go to another school. And they ended up agreeing that as long as it was 2 days or less a week, that she could stay at her local school.
That's good.
So, and in her case, it was a choice. For your kids, they had to learn it.
Yeah,
So there wasn't
and
a choice
it's
in
hard
that.
because there's not enough TVIs and O&Ms to serve the VI population. It kind of puts the school the size of our district.
Yeah.
It forces their hand to serve our kids that way. I get that, but then it's still not fair. Your kids having to go 30, 40 minutes away.
Well, because they're not interacting with their peers. They're
Yes.
they're from their community.
Their neighborhood. Yeah.
Right. So, so that's some good advice for the parents as far as doing some of the research and looking into what the choices are, the types of schools.
Even
too.
finding out if there's another VI kid in your school district, because then your kid may not meet another VI child till they're in college or later. And really, that social network is too important to wait till then.
And how would you go about finding that because of privacy issues?
I think you could ask the general question, like when you're calling schools, because I know, like we're looking at colleges, our question is, have you served a VI student before? And I'm pretty sure I have seen on message boards, that parents can ask the school, do you have a TVI on staff? Do you have an O&M? Or do you contract it out? If they contract it, that could be an indicator that maybe they only have had 1-2 VI students, especially in a rural, rural location. They're probably not going to have a TVI. And then sometimes that forces the family to send their child to the state school for the blind.
Right. Because we met you and several other families after asking a teacher that Emily had if she knew any other families. And then, of course, she shut down completely because she couldn't disclose any information. So I gave her my name and email and phone number, and I said, give this to anyone that you interact with. And let them contact me. And so we got connected with a friend of ours, and that's how I got connected that way. When we moved to North Carolina, it was really hard to get connected anywhere and to find, what are there even resources out there? And and
the HIPAA Act has made that hard for support groups to get in contact. I know that was a struggle when we had our support group. Was now it's harder to find those families that need you.
Right.
So you have to trust other people to hand out your brochure or your information. Mm-hmm. Teachers and doctors and all of that.
And parents need to be willing to think outside the box and to get out there to get connected, because it's important for the kids to have peers, but it's equally important for the parents to have peers and to be able to, because how many times, our kids face totally different things, but how many times have we talked to each other and brainstormed together about things that we at least can think along similar terms.
Right. And that's the one thing I tell every parent is find a parent who's ahead of you, who's already down the path. And I'm like super thankful because I have 4 or 5 of you who are ahead of me that I can, talk to and go, how'd you handle this? How'd you do this? You know? And then, I have parents under me that always ask me questions, and I'm probably a little more aggressive, in handling things because I'm assertive and I'm going to fight for my kids, where, I would say the majority of parents are not that way and they're more treading lightly. But I've learned to tread lightly at first, and then sometimes you have to be a little assertive.
There's times that Mama Bear has to come out.
Yes. Yes. And we had a recent win, so it worked. I treaded nicely.
I saw that. I was
nicely, and then we won. I didn't have to go ugly.
I was glad to see that when it came across.
Yeah.
You've had some different schooling experiences that you've worked through. Did you want to speak about any of that, or?
So we, like right now, we're not on a traditional path. So they went to elementary school with the VI resource program was at the school. So there's a TVI there every day. There's O&M doesn't live there because it's O&M. They got to see a lot of kids.
Right.
But they got O&M every week. And so, and we're thankful that the school, it was a good elementary education. Olivia did miss some technology. She, a lot of the TVIs are older and they don't know the technology, but TVIs also have to know so much today. And that technology piece is missing for probably 90% of TVIs, I would say, today. So really parents got to be super resourceful to make that part happen. But anyway, so we had a little tussle with the school because we wanted her at her base school for middle school, but they weren't going to let that happen. And so I was like, well, we'll just bring her home. And Tonya's daughter was already in an online school. And so we found that out from you guys, and it was working out well, even though you have different services. We're Braille, you're not Braille.
Right. A very,
But,
very big difference there. But
right. And they did try to push back. So we applied, it wasn't a lottery then because it was new-ish. It was
Right.
only their second year. So we got in, and I only brought Olivia home because I wasn't going to try to do both at the same time. And so we applied for the online public charter school, and we got in, and they tried to push back. And I was like, well, I know you have another VI student. So yes, I do know you provide these services at home. And so they relented. And
not to mention that it's a public school. They have to do it.
Right. It's a public school. They have to provide the resources. And really, it was a huge blessing to our family. They've been great to us for the most part.
Good.
Administrators try to get involved, and that's when things get derailed. And that's only happened a couple times. But we got back on track. Mama Bear came out, handled it, got back on track. But otherwise, they've been they've been great to us, so I can't complain. So both of them are now home doing school and online. So Olivia and I we worked our heinies off that summer before 6th grade, learning the technology. We probably brought in 2 people to try to help us learn. We had to learn the screen reader. We had to sort of figure out the platform without having good access to the school platform, because you can't get in until they let you in.
Right.
And so we learned what we could, like on Word and everything, and email. And it was crazy. Had notes and notes and notes of commands, okay, you do this command to do this, and then brailing everything. And it was a lot of work, but it was much easier once, I knew what to do then. It's just like Evan, he learns from me and Olivia.
Right.
He gets the benefit of everything because his path is so much easier because we had to figure everything out for Olivia. But so they're both doing great. And now I look at it, they're super prepared for college.
Yeah, I was thinking about that.
It's the exact thing they're going to be doing in college with Blackboard or whatever platform the college uses.
Yeah, it'll just be a matter of learning which one it is they're using.
Yeah, and Olivia's dual enrolled with the community college, and so she's figured their platform. I help her zero at Wake Tech, maneuvering, registering, anything. She does it all herself.
Nice.
So she has figured it out. Yeah. And then Evan can just ask her, when he gets there. So.
His first time fighting for himself is going to be when he goes to college, unless he goes to the same college as she does.
True.
So, but we found, because both my kids have disability services, and even though the colleges are different, the process is the same as it was at Wake Tech and at Durham Tech too. So I think they're very similar at all the different schools. You just have to, not every office is called the same thing. So you have to research a little bit to find out what that office is called at that school.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And then it's just different people who have different beliefs of how they should serve. So
yeah,
you have some battles there still, but yeah.
So the technology, I know you had a huge hurdle at first, but then you've also had a few times where they've changed the system and you've had to go back in. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, so they've changed the platform, the school platform. They're trying to make it more accessible, so that's good. But math is math, and a lot of that's images, equations loaded as images, but all their math is provided in Braille, paper Braille.
Oh, good.
And so that's not really an issue. And then they changed the sort of like Zoom. They went from one, I think it was Blackboard, to Neuro, and the newer platform isn't super great. It's still not perfect. They can't control, and write on the whiteboard and write their answers. They've never been able to do that. But they can write in chat, and they can answer ABCD, polling questions and raise their hand.
So how do they handle the on, like, the small group setting there? Do they have someone assigned to read it to them?
Well, when they breakout rooms,
that's what they're
called. That's a struggle because so many of the kids don't want to use their mic. And so usually we have to find, the teacher kind of has to find a good partner who's willing to use their mic, listen and write down, like if it's a math breakout room, hey, will you write 2x plus 1 equals blah, 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 to show their work.
Right.
Like Olivia had a really good girl partner that she became friends with and even met outside, even though they were in Charlotte, we met up, at different places and stuff. So that was really nice. It doesn't seem like they do as much breakout rooms these days. I don't, I only know what the kids tell me if they complain about something. So
and I'm sure it depends on the teacher.
I don't hear much complaining, so I guess it's not really happening much, maybe.
So both the kids, their situation is a little bit different than a typical kid going to their local public school or even homeschooling, because they would have mom right there with them. They're kind of in between the two. But so do they get a copy of the teacher's notes?
Yeah, so because it's online, all the teachers have a PowerPoint that they're going to flip through. So we get that in advance and we make sure that it's accessible. Like if it's an image of text, I convert it to text.
Right.
And so it's actual text.
Okay.
So I just science, there's drawings, we have like models of everything that I've tried to find, because I'm like, I really don't want to draw DNA. I'm like, let me see what Amazon has for a DNA model.
Well, with the 3D printers, you just need to find someone that has a 3D printer to print them all out for you.
Yes, we have one. I just can't figure out how to finish the setup on it.
Okay.
But I met a parent yesterday at a VI thing, and she's like, I will come and set it up. I have 14 3D printers.
Wow.
So I'm like, yeah, she makes like YouTube videos and stuff. I'm totally fascinated.
Wow.
So yeah,
I've never seen one in action.
She's obsessed with filament. She's obsessed with the filament because it's gotten really fancy with glitter and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So yeah, so she's like, I'll come do it. I'm like, please come set me up.
So last couple questions about just raising your children, basically. But between the elementary school and having to go into petitioning for the local middle school and then making the choice to change, you've had to advocate for your kids quite a bit. Mm-hmm. What advice would you give to parents as far as how to go about that process if they're not getting what they need, or if they have questions and they need to bring those questions to the table? How is the best way to approach that?
Well, it's sort of funny and sad, but true. So our recent little battle, we had the contractor I work for had an advocate. She's like, why don't you talk to the advocate before, going down the ugly path, So I was like, okay, talk to the advocate. But I was just like, oh my God, I wish I did this 10 years ago, because she walked me through the IEP, like every section, and was like, this is what should be here. Like your parent, and these are super good tips, pay attention. So like your parent concern, she's like, that should be a whole page. Just everything you can think of, all your concerns. It doesn't matter when your concern is for, like her example was, I worked with a parent who had been fighting for a one-on-one aid for her child for 2 years, but nowhere in any IP was that ever mentioned that the parent wanted. She's like, not going to happen. It's not in the IEP. Oh. And a judge is not going to read emails of you asking for a one-on-one.
Okay.
So I was like, wow, I wish I knew that. I knew like a little enough to get by, like be sure stuff is in the meeting notes. When in your IEP, like we were wanting a new refreshable Braille display for Olivia. And I was like, be sure that's in the meeting notes. I want it in there that we are requesting a new refreshable Braille display. So I knew it had to be in the IEP to get it, but you just don't know where it needs to be.
Right.
And then like your vision for the future, again, that should be a page long of what your vision and how you hope they get here and get there and go to college and whatever. Not like ours was always, we hope they have a typical life, going to college and have a career. That was ours.
Well, the
And I
section's
saw
really
it in
small.
somebody else's. Right.
It's like
one sentence.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm like, okay, I'll work on that. And then like another section was training for staff. So if you put, say, DPI, your state public education has a webinar or a seminar on how to work with a dyslexic student or a VI student or a HI student, you can put that in that section of the IEP, and any teacher that works with your child has to do that webinar seminar.
Interesting.
Because it's in the IEP. I was like, where were you 10 years ago?
I could have used that through high school with my son.
Right.
It would have saved a lot of my own training for them.
Yeah. So, I mean, and you see all these IEP trainings, and I've been to them, but I never heard any of all of that. But this advocate moved here from another state, and she was like, North Carolina is a hot mess when they serve their special needs. They are not doing right by their special needs population. And I was like, yeah, I know that. And so she kind of really detailed of where your IEP, is your armor, and like it's your 10 commandments, it's in the IEP, it needs to be done. And so even if you're not having trouble, I think it's good to reach out. I mean, it was worth the money to find out that advice, because even though it was about Olivia, who, her next IEP is going to be when she's almost graduating, but I'm like, I probably need to call a new IEP meeting and ask some questions about some stuff. And then, but for Evan, I was like, oh my gosh, Evan's IEP is next week, churning out that vision, churning out those concerns. And, and it got the school's attention because our caseworker was like, well, I see all these concerns, but they seem to be addressed in the goals, so I think you're okay. I'm like, yeah, I just want to be sure that, even though it's a goal, it's still a concern, and that it's not written off too fast.
Right.
Stuff like that. So even if you're not having trouble, I think it's worthwhile either checking with another parent, checking with an advocate, or even a trusted teacher. I mean,
we have a guest coming on. I think she's going to be in next month. I'll be interviewing her soon, but she's actually going to be talking about how to advocate for your child. And and so I'm hoping to get some specific questions for her before the interview next week. But
yeah, and that's good. I mean, like, obviously you always want everything in writing. You like, even if you have a verbal conversation, you send an email per our conversation. This is what I understand is going to happen. Yeah. And even if it's not in the IEP, and you can always call an IEP whenever you want. All those little things that the school isn't really going to tell you. So you have to have your network to help you.
I always found that by following up the IEP meeting with a thank you note to everyone that was present, made a big difference in the relationship afterwards. No matter how stressful it got during the meeting, it seemed to diffuse some of that afterwards.
Right.
So,
because really, we should all be on the same side of serving the student.
At one point, I took a picture of one of my kids and laid it on the middle of the table. Because we had so many just stressful meetings that I finally said, we need to remember this is why we're all here.
Right.
Not for
and
any
that's
other
one
reason.
of the problems with North Carolina is they don't include the kids in the meeting. Like in Ohio, kids go to the IEP meetings from kindergarten.
Wow.
And I also think it keeps the negativity. Well, little Johnny's not da-da-da-da-da.
Oh, true.
Well, you're not going to say that in front of little Johnny.
Right.
So I think that's one thing parents can do is always, if they can sit for 2 hours. Obviously, little ones sometimes are longer IEPs because you're still learning the child. But I think that's a good idea. And I would have done that sooner. Like once they were in high school, they were in their IEP. But
I think they have to go at that point. Or they have to be invited. They don't have to attend. But
Right.
And then if
it's much different because now they can speak up for themselves, and say, this is why I really need this. This happened. Here's an example. Da, 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 da,
When if they're 18 before they graduate, then it's their
They
meeting.
can
They have
change
to
what they
invite you.
want.
They can
Yeah.
keep you from going to the meeting if they want to.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen some posts about 18-year-olds like dropping stuff from their IEP because,
Yep.
for whatever reason.
They're done. They're ready to be out of school.
Yeah. Tired of people telling them what to do, I guess.
Right. All right, so you made reference to O&M. So part of the reason I wanted to have Traci on was because she's a fantastic parent advocate for her kids, and so I wanted to make sure that you heard her story that way. But she's also gone back to school in the last years and received a whole new degree path.
Forever. Yes.
So you are an O&M, but tell our listeners what an O&M is.
So an O&M is an orientation and mobility specialist, orientation and mobility specialist. So you do like travel skills, you teach the cane, or like you can be an O&M and work with an older person who's lost their vision to learn how to label stuff in their home, or how to learn how to now manage their home. Even like cleaning tips, depending on the age and what they need to know. Or when kids go off to college, they get O&M to their new college so they know how to get to their classes and learn the layout of the campus.
So it's more than just travel then.
Right.
If
It's a lot of mental mapping.
Okay.
Like building that mental map. Like I know like Evan and Olivia are building their mental map of downtown Raleigh. They hope to go to the college downtown Raleigh. So they're building that map. Just, at least learning how to build that map, establishing their landmarks, especially if you have the talking crosswalk things.
Right.
The official name is escaping my mind, but pedestrian something. That's always a good landmark because some of them will say, crossing Davies at Fayetteville Street, so exactly where you are. Yeah, O&M can cover a lot, learning cardinal directions. I'm working on that with a student, and learning how to use landmarks, and a landmark could be, a landmark can or can't, I can't remember now, be a smell, but like if there's a bakery, it's not always going to have a smell. So it's probably not a landmark. It's a clue. So it's little stuff like that. So,
there was a couple that I knew when we were first married. We lived out in the mountains, and Steve was going to grad school, and I was driving a local bus, and so I would pick up mainly the elderly, but I had a couple that was blind that I would drive into town to do their shopping, and the husband would help me find the location of some of the other stops, and he would have me slow down at different times, and he would listen. So he was listening for a creek for one turn, and there were dogs in a yard that were always in the yard for another one.
Right.
So would those be clues then, or would those
the
be...
dogs might be a clue because they might get shot or
true. I always wondered if the dogs are eating, are we going to know where to turn?
Right. Once the dogs are gone, they're not going to be there forever. But yeah, like a creek would be a landmark.
So even though he was using the sound of it, it would still be the landmark itself. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
That is cool. So that started a long time ago. Well, I think before Evan went to kindergarten, I started it. And mostly I only started it to learn myself of how to help the kids.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Did they influence that path of study for you?
Yeah. Right. And because I knew I wasn't interested in TVI, because TVI is stuck inside all day and they can be stuck in one school all day. And I was like, no, and you get to go outside and, go here and there and do different things. So I was like, that sounds much more fun. And a lot of it, the education overlaps what a TVI learns as well. So you get a little bit, but, and then once Evan went into kindergarten, I stopped because I was like, trying to work and manage both the kids and stay on the school. It was just too much. And I was a one class per semester student.
Okay.
And so when Olivia came home, I was like, oh my gosh, I should go finish that. And the only thing that saved me from having to start all over was that I was getting a certificate and not my master's, because my degrees are in accounting, not education. So I couldn't do the master's unless I got an education bachelor's, and I was not doing that. And I was like, I just want the knowledge. I don't even know if I want to work it. So he was like, well, you're lucky you're getting the certificate. You don't have to start all over.
Nice.
So yeah. So it only took me like 2 more years to finish. And then just with every, life and my work, it just hasn't been the right time. And really it's the paperwork that's the scary part of serving kids, because it's just so much paperwork. And so I've decided, I was like, okay, I'm going to take a baby step. So I have 2 students that I see, and they're not every week. One of them is like 6 times a quarter, which is almost every week, but I still can miss a week. And the other one's only 3 times a quarter. So I'm like, that's enough, because the paperwork.
Now, are these young? Are these school age kids or older?
One's a kindergartner, and then one's I think he's 5th grade.
Okay, so elementary.
And one's low vision, and one's not.
Okay.
One has a more severe. So I kind of have both ranges to work with. So it's fun. It's fun.
That's pretty nice, though.
Yeah.
So tell me, this is a question I've always had, because I get them confused because some of the skills seem to overlap. What's the main difference between O&M and TVI?
TVI, well, when I think of TVI, I think of, like, for mine, it's learning Braille, and like learning your shapes, tactilely learning your shapes, like, especially when they're little. But and a TVI covers, everything you're going to need to be successful in life academically, and cover the ECC, like all the, I think, what is it, 12? Is it 12?
The ECC is Extended Core Curriculum, is that correct?
Right, which covers your careers, what are you going to do for recreation, technology. I think technology's in there. And gosh, what's some others? Daily living skills. So I've always felt like, as a parent, daily living skills was on me. Like, I should be teaching them how to fold their clothes, but a TVI can do that as well. That does fall under a TVI.
Okay.
But the only thing, like, recently is like, can you please help me, like, cleaning up after ourselves a little bit? I'm like, I hate to ask for this help, but can you please just make a goal for cleaning up after yourself?
Hey, we have the same conversations here. So. And my kids are older, so.
Yeah, I felt bad, but I'm like, I need some help here. But even that kind of stuff, but there's 12, I think there's 12 areas of it, but they help. And that's just about making sure they have the exposure. So TVI is sort of about all the exposure of how to be a well-rounded person. Like, about things in your area to do, like recreational, whatever is offered. Like, the city of Raleigh has a VI program for adults that you can join. They'll come and pick you up and take you to an activity.
I didn't know that.
And take you back home. So it's about knowing how to make a phone call and go, hey, do you have any programs? Blah, blah, blah. And then O&M is pretty much more of travel, like, at the, what do they call that center now? They changed the name of that DSB adult center. So, like, if you have an adult who's recently lost vision, and to me, they need to be in a good place to learn the new skills. I had a student there who was not in a good place. So it was like pulling teeth to get her to do anything, because she was not in a good place to learn new skills as a blind person.
Right.
So for O&M, we worked on, how to use a cane, and all those, like, downtown has a lot of cracks in the sidewalk. Well, I'm not going to tell you that there's a crack coming up you have to know how to use the cane. You know, she would get mad at me because I wouldn't tell her there was a crack coming up. I'm like, not my job. What if you're walking by yourself? Nobody's going to come running up to you to tell you there's a crack inside.
Right.
And so, you know, you have to have those skills or you're going to be stuck at home, you know, so which would you rather? So I would say that O&M is mostly travel, but they can help with more stuff in the household as well, for, you know, your older clients who are adjusting to blindness.
I think where I've gotten confused is O&M can take you to the grocery store to learn to do your shopping,
orient you,
but then TVI can help you with your cleaning at home and putting the things on the shelves, and they kind of go together.
Really, I think both of them can do like the home stuff. It could fall under both of them.
Okay.
But yeah, because like, you know, in preschool, the kids went to the grocery store all the time to go and feel all the fruit and vegetables and learn what an orange felt like, or a zucchini, or, you know, if your family didn't eat rutabagas or something, you know, you could go to the store and feel them and see how they're different from an apple. And then you have O&M where you're orienting to the store. So like, because of my O&M, like if the kids rarely go to the grocery store with me, but when they would, I'd be like, all right, you're responsible to go get the turkey at the deli counter. It's straight ahead, figure it out. And that's just my mean mom style. You know, I just throw them to the wild. And I'm like, there's some things, use your cane, be sure you're sweeping, you'll be fine. Yeah. And then get to the counter, you know, and order the meat. And then Olivia, you know, she'll even go look for canned stuff. And I'm like, there's always somebody around.
I was going to say, ask you. That's part of getting around, is asking those questions.
Right. And so I'm like, somebody will ask you, and somebody always does. Do you need help finding something? And she's like, yeah, I'm looking for this. And, you know, and then she comes back and finds me. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and making them do that kind of stuff is just going to make them better adults.
I'll say it's not being mean. You're giving them skills that they're going to need to survive out of your house one day.
They may think I'm mean.
Yeah. You and Gene have done a good job of getting the kids independent, which I've always been really impressed with. It's I'm looking forward to seeing what both of them are going to do in the next 10 years, where they're going to be.
Yes.
So, all right. So let me think back through this again. So if we're a young family right now, they're more than likely going to have TVI home services if they're still in that preschool time, and maybe an OT or a PT coming in too. O&M, maybe not until they're in formal schooling.
Yeah,
at least preschool.
0 to 3 is like one group is responsible for the child, and then 3 to kindergarten is like your local preschool. But I know like that varies by state. 'Cause my mom worked in Kentucky, and so they don't have a preschool program. Really? But they have they have a visually impaired preschool services, VIPS. Okay. And so, but I don't think it was free, but it was a preschool that kids could come to that served visually impaired kids. I think it was in Louisville. But interesting. I know they did a lot of fundraising, so I don't know if they got any kind of government funding, and maybe the parents had to pay some for that. I'm not sure.
And we were in Commonwealths for all of preschool, so it was provided for them. And then we were here for second grade for Emily, so we didn't. She wasn't here during that time.
Yeah, which is why I think.
Which is why I never know whenever you reference someone from GMS preschool. Because we were never there.
Oh, okay. Because I think GMS preschool was 0 to 3, and then 3 to 5 was our county. Okay. But your county, you know, can let you go to GMS preschool, but GMS preschool doesn't have classrooms anymore. Okay. I think it's just all itinerant now. They just come to the child. Okay. And then once you go in kindergarten, your school system.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, but you probably wouldn't get O&M until they're at least 3, I would.
Right. Imagine. And if you're, depending on the vision level of your child, you may not have O&M, or it may just be an evaluation time with that. Yeah. So, because even with Emily's vision, she had O&M, but it wasn't as often as your kids would have had it.
Right.
And at first it was the same. Well, she was serviced by someone that had dual certification until she was in middle school. So I don't really know which was which because it was the same person.
Same person.
Yeah. And they would combine activities in each visit. So,
right.
And then she also had OT. So some of that might have been a TVI doing that instead, but she had OT as well. So, but unlike Olivia, she was afraid to touch anything, or so we were just praying that she would eventually put her hands out and touch something. So,
oh no!
So she was a little defensive.
Right.
So with O&M, I'm assuming that you're teaching sighted guide techniques to the student, but who's learning how to be the sighted guide?
So like my little kindergartner, we just went over that because he just had his IEP. And so we talked about like, really he should be asking for sighted guide when he needs it. But the teachers need to know how to provide that, or anybody, that comes in contact with them. Because what do most people want to do? They want to grab them or push them. I mean, my husband's still notorious for like leading them through the crowd from behind. Drives me insane. But so, and well, now it's not sighted guide, it's human guide.
Oh, okay.
Because really a VI person could lead another VI person.
True.
Yeah. So
human guide.
So it's human guide. So they can, like a little kid can just take like 2 fingers, or they can take your wrist, and then as they get taller, they would hook on above your elbow. And like today, Evan had a swim meet, and I had somebody tapping him that had never worked with him. It was just a girl at a local college because we had to go out of town for a meet, and I didn't have anybody to help me. And so I was like, oh, I need to show you human guide, because you have to take him to the start end and then take him away from when he finishes, because I tap the turns. And so I'm like, if you just touch them with your arm so they know you're there and you're touching them for a reason, like, hey, grab on to me.
Right.
And so that's basically human guide. You let them know you're there, just touch them with the back of your hand, and they'll feel up your arm or down to your wrist. And so, I showed all the teachers, sometimes, classes are in a hurry or they're running late and they can't wait for them to grab their cane and get it, and, or they're kind of slow. Sometimes they're a little pokey, and they've got to hurry up. I'm like, if it's just inconvenient to wait for them to use their cane, just say, we're going to do sighted guide. Do you want grab my fingers, or do you want to grab my wrist? And this one's, he's kind of little, so it's always easier for him just to take your fingers. Mm-hmm. And that way it gives them some control over their body. You're not clutching them, and they feel like they're just being told where to go, where if they're hanging on to you, they can always let go and they have control over their own bodies. So and that's important for everybody to feel like they're in control.
So for this little guy that you're talking about, so is he putting his hand over the fingers or under?
So he's just gripping.
So he's holding it. Okay.
Yeah.
That's normally, so like if I were guiding you, would you put your hand over my arm, or how would you do it?
I would like we describe it like as holding a cup. So I'm just going to grab the back right above your elbow.
Okay.
Of your arm.
Okay. That's what I was wondering how you do that part. Is there,
and then you're just, the traveler is just a little bit behind the guide.
Right. Yeah. Because otherwise you can't really tell.
Yeah. It's kind of hard to do side by side.
They're reaching the obstacle at the same time as you are at that point.
Right. That would not be good.
No. So is there a website or any type of resource that parents could go to if they wanted to learn some of the techniques?
There's tons of YouTube videos on human guide.
So human guide is the term they're going to search for.
Human guide is the correct term today.
Okay, I'll see if I can get a few of those linked on the resources for this one to get them started. Because I think it would be good, even if you don't have a child that has a visual impairment, I think it would be nice if all of us were aware of the technique.
Right. Because as we learn, even Olivia said her new O&M, which she had him when she was in elementary, but she has him again now. But they've been working because she's working like college campus, and the way people tend to want to help, if you're standing at a corner waiting to cross, and a blind person or a VI person is going to listen to the traffic flow for 2 or 3 times to figure out how traffic is moving before they're going to cross. And so as they're standing there, what people like to do is just grab their arm and pull them across the street.
Right.
And so you have to learn how to break that grasp. And so Olivia said her O&M has been working on that, on how to break that grip of somebody just grabbing you, because then they disorient you if they move you.
Right.
And then you have to reorient to where you knew you were in space. And so that's, why it's really important not to mess with VI people, because most of them do know what they're doing. It's just going to take them a little longer. They need time to assess what the traffic flow is and what's going on before they're going to try and cross. And honking or yelling at them to cross doesn't help them.
Right. Well, because I was thinking,
they don't know where you are.
I hadn't even thought about it. I mean, just a slight turn, and now you're walking into the middle of the intersection instead of across the street.
Right, because you're thinking about how your feet are lined up on the curb. You've done all these things with the truncated dome, the little bumpy pads.
Yep.
And I mean, those are for wheelchair people, but it also helps VI people to know, that's where the curb is to the street at this truncated dome. And, when we were under blindfold training, I always used that curb. My toes were on the edge of the curb. So I knew I was straight and ready to straight cross, because you don't want to veer, especially veer left and veer out into the middle of that intersection.
Right.
Would not be pretty. So,
no. Or, and even if they've moved you enough, now you're going across the other street and not where you started from. So.
Yeah. And if there's no talking crosswalk, there's no way to determine that, really.
When I know
haven't been paying really close attention to your intersection.
When I know if I'm driving not to stop and let someone cross, to just follow the regular traffic pattern, because that's too disorienting too, because now you've changed the flow of what it should be. Right. And you don't know what traffic's going to do beside you. They may not stop, just because you stop. And I don't know about you, but I'm not even comfortable. If I'm waiting to cross the street, I don't want a car to stop for me, because I can't see what's coming behind them. I can't, it's more than just that car that I'm dealing with. Right.
You still got the other direction to deal with.
Exactly. So drivers out there, don't stop and let people go if it's not the time to stop. keep on going.
Don't honk, don't yell. The things we heard when we were under blindfold.
Don't grab anyone.
Why do you think that's helpful?
I think everyone should spend some time under blindfold just to see, not in their house, outside, in a very vulnerable area to see what it's really like.
That's true.
Well, it's time for the speed round.
Okay. Yay.
As I say, it's everybody's favorite part of the show. All right, so for the speed round, I'm going to give you a series of 10 questions, 3 open-ended, 7 either or, and you have an unlimited amount of time to do this. What is your favorite color?
Pink.
I was waiting for an answer. Yes, I actually believe you, because I've seen your hair that color. What was the last book that you read?
I think House Fire might have been the last. I like financial stuff.
What's your favorite holiday?
Holiday? I guess Christmas.
That's the most popular one so far.
Yeah.
All right, so now we're on to the either or. So cake or ice cream?
Cake.
All sugar, of course, right?
All sugar.
Batman or Superman?
Batman.
Ocean or mountains?
Ocean.
I knew that was going to be going in there. Winter or summer?
Summer.
Watch a movie or read a book?
Read a book.
Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings?
Harry Potter.
Ooh, you surprised me on that one. Twitter or
I've never
Instagram?
read Lord of the Rings.
Oh. Twitter or Instagram?
Instagram.
All right, so you were a little bit of an outlier there. what I'm finding is there's some
it could be age.
well, there's some age issues that are fitting into some patterns on there.
Okay.
But you're not a typical pattern follower there, which is a good thing. So Traci, it's been fun talking to you today. I appreciate you coming on to the podcast and sharing your information with us. And if our listeners would like to get in touch with you, do you have a way to do that, or would you rather them go through Water Prairie?
They can do Instagram. I think you can tell how much I'm on Instagram, but I am on there. I know it's O for Olivia, and A-N-D, E for Evan, Mom. I think that's all it is.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
I can put that in the show notes too, so if anybody does have a direct question. You've been listening to the Water Prairie Chronicles. Any resources mentioned during this episode will be posted in the description. If you're interested in joining us as a guest, contact us through the links in the description below. Be sure to subscribe and share it with your friends. We appreciate your support as we build this resource. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week for a new episode.